Listen to this observation by the great mental science practitioner of the early 20th century. His name was Thomas Troward. Quote, "The law of flotation was not discovered by contemplating the sinking of things, but by contemplating the floating of things which floated naturally, and then intelligently asking why they did so." Unquote. In the early days of shipbuilding, ships were made of wood, and the reasoning was that wood floats in water and iron sinks. Yet today, ships all over the world are built of iron. As people began studying the law of flotation, it was discovered that anything could float if it's lighter than the mass of liquid it displaces. So today, we're able to make iron float by the very same law that made it sink. Keep this example in mind as you listen and apply the contents of this chapter on connecting to all that you're intended to become. The key word here is contemplating, or what you're placing your thoughts on as you begin utilizing the enormous potential and the power of intention. You must be able to connect to intention, and you can't access and work with intention if you're contemplating the impossibility of being able to intend and manifest. You can't discover the law of co-creation if you're contemplating what's missing. You can't discover the power of awakening if you're contemplating things that are still asleep. The secret to manifesting anything that you desire is your willingness and your ability to realign yourself so that your inner world is in harmony with the power of intention. Every single modern advance that you see and take for granted was created, and creating is what we're doing here in this chapter, by someone contemplating what they intend to manifest. The way to establish a relationship with Spirit and access the power of this creating principle is to continuously contemplate yourself as being surrounded by the conditions you wish to produce. Dwell on the idea of a supreme, infinite power producing the results that you desire. This power is the creative power of the universe. It's responsible for everything coming into focus. By trusting it to provide the form and the conditions for its manifestation, you establish a relationship to intention that allows you to be connected for as long as you practice this kind of personal intent. Entering into the spirit of intention. Whatever you intend to create in your life involves generating the same life-giving quality that brings everything into existence. The spirit of anything, the quality that allows it to come into the world of form, is true as a general principle, so why not activate it within yourself? The power of intention simply awaits your ability to make the connection. How do you enter into the spirit of intention, which is all about feelings expressing life? You can nurture it by your continual, ongoing expectation of the infallible spiritual law of increase being a part of your life. We saw it through our imaginary capacity to see higher vibrations, and we heard it in the voice given to it by spiritual masters throughout the ages. It's everywhere. It wants to express life. It's pure love in action. It's confident. And guess what? You are it. But you've forgotten that. You need to simply trust your ability to cheerfully rely upon Spirit to express itself through and for you. Your task is to contemplate the energies of life, love, beauty, and kindness. Every action that's in harmony with this originating principle of intention gives expression to your own personal power of intention. Applying the 7 phases for connecting to intention. Having been in the business of human development for most of my life, the question I most frequently hear is, how do I go about getting what I want? At this juncture of my life, as I sit here recording this, my response is, if you become what you think about, and what you think about is getting what you want, then you'll stay in a state of wanting. So the answer to how to get what you want is to reframe the question. How do I go about getting what I intend to create or co-create? My answer to that question is in the remainder of this chapter, but my short answer is this. You get what you intend to create by being in harmony with the power of intention, which is responsible for all of creation. Underline that in your mind. I'll say it again. You get what you intend to create by being in harmony with the power of intention, which is responsible for all of creation. So, begin to remove that ego burden from your shoulders and reconnect to intention. When you lay your ego aside and return to that from which you originally emanated, you'll begin to immediately see the power of intention working with, for, and through you in a multitude of ways. Here are those 7 phases revisited to help you to begin to make them a part of your life. First, be creative. Being creative means trusting your own purpose and having an attitude of unbending intent in your daily thoughts and activities. Staying creative means giving form to your personal intentions. A way to start giving them form is to literally put them in writing. For instance, in my writing space here on Maui, I've written out my intentions, and here are a few of them that stare at me each day as I write. My intention is for all of my activities to be directed by Spirit. My intention is to love and radiate my love to my writing and any who might hear these words. My intention is to trust in what comes through me and to be a vehicle of Spirit, judging none of it. My intention is to recognize the Spirit as my source and to detach from my ego. My intention is to do all that I can to elevate the collective consciousness to be more closely in rapport with the spirit of the originating supreme power of intention. To express your creativity and put your own intentions into the world of the manifest, I recommend that you practice something called japa, a technique first offered by the ancient Vedas. Japa meditation is the repetition of the sound of the names of God while simultaneously focusing on what you intend to manifest. Repeating the sound within the name of God while asking for what you want generates creative energy to manifest your desires. And your desires are the movement of the universal mind within you. Now you may be skeptical about the feasibility of such an undertaking. Well, I ask you to open yourself up to this idea of japa as an expression of your creative link to intention. I won't describe the method in depth here because I've written an entire book about it with an accompanying CD by Hay House called Getting in the Gap, Making Conscious Contact with God Through Meditation, and I urge you to read that and practice it. For now, just know that I consider meditating and practicing japa essential in the quest to realign yourself with the power of intention. That power is creation, and you need to be in your own unique state of creativity to collaborate with the power of intention. Meditation and japa are surefire ways to do so. Secondly, be kind. A fundamental attribute of the supreme originating power is called kindness. All that's manifested is brought here to thrive. It takes a kindly power to want what it creates to thrive and multiply. Were this not the case, then all that's created would be destroyed by the same power that created it. In order to reconnect to intention, you must be on the same kindness wavelength as intention itself. Make an effort to live in cheerful kindness. It's a much higher energy than sadness or malevolence, and it makes the manifestation of your desires possible. It's through giving that we receive. It's through acts of kindness directed toward others that our immune systems are strengthened and even our serotonin levels increased. This idea of extending kindness is particularly relevant in how you deal with people who are helpless, elderly, mentally challenged, poor, disabled, and so on. These people are all part of God's perfection. They too have a divine purpose, and since all of us are connected to each other through spirit, their purpose and intent is also connected to you. Extend thoughts of kindness everywhere. Practice kindness towards earth by picking up a piece of litter that's on your path, or saying a silent prayer of gratitude for the existence of rain, the color of flowers, or even the paper that you hold in your hand that was donated by a tree. The universe responds in kind to what you elect to radiate outward. If you say with kindness in your voice and in your heart, "How may I serve you?" the universe's response will be, "How may I serve you as well?" It's called attractor energy. It's this spirit of cooperation with all of life that emerges from the essence of intention. And this spirit of kindness is one that you must learn to match if connecting back to intention is your desire. My daughter Summer has written from her experience about how small acts of kindness go a long way. Here's what she said in an essay she wrote. I was getting off the turnpike one rainy afternoon, and I pulled up to the toll booth while fumbling through my purse. The woman smiled at me and said, "The car before you has paid your toll." I told her I was traveling alone and extended my money. She replied, "Yes, the man instructed me to tell the next person who came to my booth to have a brighter day." That small act of kindness did give me a brighter day. I felt so moved by someone I would never know, I began to wonder how I could brighten someone else's day. I called my best friend and told her about my paid toll. She said she'd never thought of doing that, but it was a great idea. She goes to the University of Kentucky and decided to pay for the person behind her every day on her way to school as she exits the toll road. I laughed at her sincerity. "You think I'm kidding," she said, "but like you said, it's only 50 cents. As we hung up, I wondered if the man who paid my toll even fathomed that his thoughtfulness would travel all the way to Kentucky. I had an opportunity to extend kindness at the supermarket one day when I had my cart filled to the top with food that my roommate and I would share over the next 2 weeks. The woman behind me had an antsy toddler and not nearly as much in her cart as I had. I said to her, "Why don't you go first? You don't have nearly as much as I do." The woman looked at me as if I just sprouted extra limbs or something. She replied, "Thank you so much. I haven't seen many people around here be thoughtful of another person. We've moved here from Virginia and are considering moving back because we're questioning whether this is the right place to raise our 3 children." Then she told me that she was about ready to give up and move back home, even though it would create a huge financial strain on her family. She said, "I'd promised myself if I didn't see a sign by the end of today, I was going to demand that we move back to Virginia. You are my sign." She thanked me, smiling as she left the store. I was flabbergasted, realizing that such a small gesture impacted a whole family. The clerk said as she was checking me out, "You know what, girl? You just made my day." I walked out smiling, wondering how many people my act of kindness would affect. The other day I was getting a breakfast sandwich and coffee and thought my coworkers might like some donuts. The 4 guys I work with at the stables live in little apartments at the front of the barns. None of them have a car, but they share a bike. I explained to them that the donuts were for them. The look of gratitude on each of their faces was rewarding in an immeasurable way. I haven't really worked here all that long, and I think that those 12 small donuts helped to break the ice a little bit. My small act of kindness turned into something huge as the week went on. We started looking out for one another more carefully and working like a team. The third way to connect to intention is to be love. Ponder these words thoughtfully. God is love, and he that dwelleth in love dwelleth in me, and I in him. That is God talking, so to speak, keeping in mind the central theme of this chapter, and in fact this entire program, that you must learn to be like the energy that allowed you to be here in the first place. Then being in a state of love is absolutely necessary for you to reconnect to intention. For the purposes of this chapter, I'd like you to think about love in the following 2 ways. First, love is cooperation rather than competition. What I'd like you to be able to experience right here in physical form on planet Earth is the essence of the spiritual plane. If this were possible, it would mean that your very life is a manifestation of love. Were this to be true for you, you'd see all of life living together in harmony and cooperating with each other. You'd sense that the power of intention that originates all life cooperates with all other life forms to ensure growth and survival. You'd note that we all share the same life force, and the same invisible intelligence that beats my heart and your heart beats the heart of everyone on this planet. And secondly, love is the force behind the will of God. I'm not suggesting the kind of love that we define as affection or sentiment, nor is this kind of love a feeling that seeks to please and press favors on others. Imagine a kind of love that is the power of intention, the very energy that is the cause behind all of creation. It's the spiritual vibration that carries divine intentions from formless to concrete expression. It creates new thought form, changes matter, vivifies all things, and holds the cosmos together beyond time and space. It's in every one of us. It is what God is. Our fourth way of reconnecting to intention. Be beauty. Emily Dickinson once wrote, "Beauty is not caused, it is." As you awaken to your divine nature, you'll begin to appreciate beauty in everything you see and touch and experience. You were brought into this world from that which perceived you as an expression of beauty. It couldn't have done so if it thought you to be otherwise. For if it has the power to create, it also possesses the power not to do so. The choice to do so is predicated on the supposition that you're an expression of loving beauty. This is true for everything and everyone that emanates from the power of intention. Here's a favorite story of mine that illustrates appreciating beauty where you once didn't. It was told by Guru Mai in her beautiful book, Kindle My Heart. Quote, "There was a man who did not like his in-laws because he felt they took up more space in the house than they should. He went to a teacher who lived nearby as he had heard a lot about him, and he said, 'Please, please do something. I cannot bear my in-laws anymore. I love my wife, but my in-laws, never. They take up so much space in the house. Somehow I feel that they're always in my way.' Well, the teacher asked him, 'Do you have some chickens?' 'Yes, I do,' he said. 'Then put all of your chickens inside the house.' He did what the teacher said and then went back to him, and the teacher asked, 'Is the problem solved?' He said, 'No, it's worse.' 'Do you have any sheep?' he asked. 'Yes.' "Well, bring all the sheep inside." He did so, and he returned to the teacher. He said, "Is the problem now solved?" He said, "No, it's getting worse." He says, "Well, then, do you have a dog?" He said, "Well, yes, I have. I have several." "Well," he said, "take all of those dogs back into the house." Finally, the man ran back to the teacher and said, "I came to you for help, but you're making my life worse than ever." The teacher said to him, "Now send all the chickens, the sheep, and the dogs back outside." The man went home and emptied the house of all the animals. There was so much space, he went back to the teacher. "Thank you," he said. "Thank you. You've solved all my problems." Number 5, as a way to connect to intention, be ever expansive. The next time you see a garden full of flowers, observe the flowers that are alive and compare them to the flowers that you believe are dead. What's the difference? The dried-up, dead flowers are no longer growing, while the alive flowers are indeed still growing. The all-emerging universal force that intended you into beingness and commences all of life is always growing and perpetually expanding. As with all 7 of these faces of intention, by reason of its universality, it must have a common nature with yours. By being in a state of ever-expanding and growing intellectually, emotionally, and spiritually, you're identifying with the universal mind. 6th, be abundant. Intention is endlessly abundant. There's no scarcity in the universal invisible world of spirit. As you contemplate connecting to intention, know in your heart that any attitude that you have that reflects a scarcity consciousness will hold you back. A reminder here is in order. You must match intention's attributes with your own in order to capitalize on those powers in your own life. When you shift to an abundance mindset, you repeat to yourself over and over and over again that you're unlimited because you emanated from the inexhaustible supply of intention. As this picture solidifies, you begin to act on this attitude of unbending intent. There's no other possibility. We become what we think about, and as Emerson reminded us, quote, "The ancestor to every action is a thought," unquote. As these thoughts of plenitude and excessive sufficiency become your way of thinking, the all-creating force to which you're always connected will begin to work with you, in harmony with your thoughts, just as it worked with you in harmony with your thoughts of scarcity. If you think you can't manifest abundance into your life, you'll see intention agreeing with you and assisting you in the fulfillment of meager expectations. I personally seem to have arrived into this world fully connected to the abundance attributes of the spiritual world from which I emanated. As a child growing up in foster homes with poverty consciousness all around me, I was the richest kid in the orphanage, so to speak. I always thought I could have more money jingling in my pockets. I pictured it there, and I consequently acted on that picture. I'd collect soda pop bottles, shovel snow, bag groceries, cut lawns, carry out people's ashes from their coal furnaces, clean up yards, paint fences, babysit, deliver newspapers, and on and on and on. And always the universal force of abundance worked with me in providing opportunities. A snowstorm was a giant blessing for me. So too were discarded bottles by the side of the road and little old ladies who needed help carrying their groceries to their automobiles. Today, over a half a century later, I still have that abundance mentality. In a sense, I'm still collecting pop bottles, shoveling snow, and carrying out groceries for little old ladies. My vision hasn't changed, although the playing field is enlarged. It's all about having an inner picture of abundance, thinking in unlimited ways, and being open to the guidance that intention provides when you're in a state of rapport with it. And then being in a state of ecstatic gratitude and awe for how this whole thing works. Every time I see a coin on the street, I stop, I pick it up, put it into my pocket, and I say out loud, "Thank you, God, for this symbol of abundance that keeps flowing into my life." Never once have I ever said, "Why only a penny, God? You know I need a lot more than that." On this day, today, on a writing day, I arise at 4 a.m. with a knowing that my writing will complete what I've already envisioned in the contemplations of my imagination. The writing flows, and letters arrive from intention's manifest abundance, urging me to read a particular book or talk to a unique individual, and I know that it's all working in perfect, abundant unity. The phone rings, and just what I need to hear is resonating in my ear. I get up to get a glass of water, and my eyes fall on a book that's been on my bookshelves for 20 years, but this time I feel compelled to pick it up. I open it, and once again I'm being directed by Spirit's willingness to assist and guide me as long as I stay in harmony with it. It goes on and on and on in my life, and I'm reminded of Rumi's poetic words from 800 years ago: "Sell your cleverness and purchase bewilderment." And finally, the 7th way of reconnecting to intention. It's called being receptive. The universal mind is ready to respond to anyone who recognizes their true relationship to it. It will reproduce whatever conception of itself that you impress upon it. In other words, it's receptive to all who remain in harmony with it and stay in a relationship of reverence for it. The issue becomes a question of your receptivity to the power of intention. Stay connected and know you'll receive all that this power is capable of offering. Take it on by yourself as separate from the universal mind, an impossibility, but nevertheless a strong belief of the ego, and you remain eternally disconnected. The nature of the universal mind is peaceful. It isn't receptive to force or violence. It works in its own time and rhythm, allowing everything to emanate by and by. It's in no hurry because it's outside of time. It's always in the eternal now. Try getting down on your hands and knees and hurrying along a tiny tomato plant sprout. Universal spirit is at work peacefully, and your attempts to rush it or tug new life into full creative flower will destroy the entire process. Being receptive means taking on a position of allowing your senior partner to handle your life for you. I accept the guidance and assistance of the same force that created me. I let go of my ego and I trust in this wisdom to move at its own peaceful place. I make no demands on it. This is how the all-creating field of intention creates. This is how you must think in order to reconnect to your source. You practice meditation because it allows you to receive the inner knowing of making conscious contact with God. By being peaceful, quiet, and receptive, you pattern yourself in the image of God, and you regain the power of your source. This is what this chapter, and indeed this entire program, is all about. That is, tapping into the essence of originating spirit, emulating the attributes of the creative force of intention, and manifesting into your life anything that you desire that's consistent with the universal mind, which is creativity, kindness, love, beauty, expansion, abundance, and peaceful receptivity. This concludes the steps for connecting to intention. But before you make this somersault into the inconceivable, I urge you to examine any and all self-imposed obstacles that need to be challenged and eradicated as you work anew at living and breathing this power of intention that was placed in your heart before a heart was even formed. As William Penn once put it, those people who are not governed by God will be ruled by tyrants.
You must know that if you are what you do, then when you don't, you aren't. It's such a simple thing that there's so many examples of people who believe that they are what they do. And then when they no longer can, that is, if they become physically incapacitated, or if they retire, or whatever, they find themselves ready to commit suicide, having an inability to handle it. This is what I was talking about when I was referring to the difference between being on purpose and being on outcome. When you're on purpose, what you do is just a reaction or a result of your purposeful living. The real great lessons that we have to learn, that the whole Bhagavad Gita is based upon, is how to detach ourselves from the fruits of our labor. Very, very tough thing for us to do in Western civilization, because we're so accustomed to believing that what we produce and what we get for ourselves really is a measure of who we are, when in fact that's a spiritual dead end. It's a dead end in the sense that life is what happens to you while you're making other plans. I mean, life is all that you are each and every day, and the outcome is just whatever is going to result from that. But if you attach yourself to the outcome, then your life becomes the waste. The moments of your living that lead up to the outcome don't count. They are called suffering, or postponing your gratification for something in the future which will never arrive, because you'll always then have to have a bigger goal, and you get on that treadmill and never get off of it. The more you know that what you do is just a choice that you're making, and it's just one out of a million options at any given moment. In this moment right now, I could be making many, many other choices. To be playing tennis, to be sitting in my hotel room alone, to be with my family, and I happen to be here, and this is what I'm doing right now. But this is not who I am. Who I am is not this tape product that I am producing. My purpose is to give and to share and to love, and this is just one manifestation of that, one way to do it. And what the outcome is like, what does the product look like? How does it sell? How do other people like it? I'm not attached to it. I don't relate to it any longer. Because when you get on purpose, outcome or the results of your labor just don't matter anymore. They're just not that important. It's even that way in competitive business world, or even that way in competitive athletics and so on. It was, 15 minutes ago that Dennis Waitley walked in here. And Dennis is here in Chicago on the same day I am, and we happen to be here in the same studio. And we were both kind of kidding each other about different programs and so on. And a lot of people think of Dennis and I as competitors. My first reaction when I saw Dennis was to throw my arms around. My belief is that everybody on the planet who is on the side of helping to improve the quality of life for other people is on my team. So I just met a teammate. I didn't meet anybody that might sell more albums than I do, or might get more notoriety than I do, or vice versa. It's not like that at all. We can kibitz about that and laugh about that. But when you're truly on the path of knowing exactly what you're about, then you welcome all of those folks who are on the same path as you and are helping you. I think all of it boils down to inner versus outer direction. Outer directed people are those who are directed by outcomes. And inner directed people are those who are directed by their purpose, or by their values, or by their esteem for themselves, or by what they feel is what they're about as a human being. Inner direction is the objective, is the goal, to be directed inwardly. But then there are people who are directed inwardly for evil purposes too, so you have to watch that. You have to be careful with that. I completely believe that anybody can change and become anything they want to in moments. And that's what I mean by instant awakening, or satori. And people ask me, Wayne, aren't you concerned about your reputation? Aren't you concerned about what those people think about you? And I say, there are 2,000 people here today. Now, I have 2,000 reputations going right now. It's true. I have no control over what each one of you decides you're going to do with what I say. My reputation is not in my hands. I have no control over that.
Extraordinary encompasses most of ordinary. Since we all live in the same physical world, there will always be forms to fill out, and rules that demand our obedience, and bills to pay, and family obligations to attend to. But extraordinary consciousness is associated with your soul, that invisible, boundaryless energy that looks out from behind your eyeballs and has very different interests than your ordinary self does. The ideal of your soul, the thing that it yearns for, is not more knowledge. It is not interested in comparison or winning or light or ownership, and not even happiness. The ideal of your soul is space, expansion, and immensity. And the one thing it needs more than anything else is to be free to expand, to reach out, and to embrace the infinite. Why? Because your soul is infinity itself. It has no restrictions or limitations. It resists being fenced in. And when you attempt to contain it with rules and obligations, it is miserable. Your invisible self is extraordinary because it is a fragment of the universal soul, which itself is infinite. The part of you that knows you have a greatness and is stirred by the idea of you expanding and removing any and all limitations is what I'm addressing here in Wishes Fulfilled. This is your new self-concept, one that is inspired by your soul. So let's take a look at this idea, and then examine what you need to do in order to make your self-concept congruent with how you want to live your life, and the powerful role you can begin to assume as a co-fulfiller of all of your rational, sensible wishes and desires. So what is your self-concept? Simply put, your concept of yourself is everything that you believe to be true. And everything that you believe to be true about yourself has landed you precisely where you live and breathe every day of your life. Your beliefs about yourself are like the ingredients in a recipe that you use to create your self-concept. You begin this exciting adventure of changing your concept of yourself by being willing to die to your present self. That's right, by relinquishing your personal history as the arbiter of your life.
You cease to resist your fuller potential. You simply no longer choose to form your identity on the basis of what you've been taught. Remind yourself that everything you believe to be true has brought you to this point where you want to explore rather than resist your higher powers. In The Power of Awareness, Neville emphatically explains that to be transformed, the whole basis of your thoughts must change. But your thoughts cannot change unless you have new ideas for you to think from your ideas. How do you find the way to ideas that will help you change your thoughts? Start by saying and writing an affirmation that appeals to you. Create your unique, heartfelt affirmation, such as, I have a burning desire, an inner flame that will not be extinguished by outer forces, to know and live from higher regions, to be transformed so that my new concept of myself will no longer include any limitations. I am willing to challenge and change any thoughts that impede my having a higher vision of myself. I'm suggesting you open your thought process to a new idea that will help you as you begin changing your concept of yourself. You can think of yourself as a divine, limitless being rather than a person who doesn't have a choice when it comes to your thoughts. Think of yourself as an observer, contemplating and selecting thoughts that you choose from that never-ending stream of thoughts on your inner screen, 24/7, 365. Watch thoughts stream by from wherever they originate and observe them rapidly transitioning and combining and appearing and then disappearing. Snatch a thought from the running ribbon of thoughts and contemplate it. As you toss it around, notice how you feel, sad, depressed, happy, frightened, so on. Every thought going by has an imprint on your concept of yourself. First, be the observer, and then the contemplator. Now become the choice maker, who can consciously decide to put that thought back onto the running stream and pick a different one, a thought that perhaps allows you to feel better. I am okay. I look fine. I will lose a few pounds. I am loved. I am divine. These, and millions more like them, are thoughts that you can opt for rather than the ones you've become accustomed to choosing in the past. This is how you begin a new process to change your concept of yourself. You accept as irrevocable that it is not you setting the stream of thoughts into motion, and that stopping thinking isn't possible at this stage of your evolution. At this stage, the essence of your being is to observe, contemplate, and then choose. This can all be done in a fraction of a nanosecond. The thoughts will keep appearing on your mental TV screen, just like the stock quotations, but you'll now be choosing the ones you want to focus on, gather, retain, or just let go. I'm encouraging you to initiate a habit of choosing thoughts and ideas that support feeling good and powerful, and that elevate you to a higher level of consciousness, where your self-concept welcomes your higher self.
When I'm in the middle of running a marathon, and someone comes up to me and says, things are going to really be bad up ahead, that's like, for me, the greatest challenge in the world. I mean, I love that. They haven't set my expectations to be something negative. If anything, they've helped me to set my expectations on, oh yeah? There's nothing, there's no wall up there that I'm interested in at all. When I play in tennis matches in the heat, in the summertime, down in Florida, people will say, well, by the third set, you're just going to be so exhausted, you're going to be sweating so much, and you're going to be cramping, and you're not going to be... And my only reaction to that always is, that's not for me. That's just what other people do, or that's what you do. You just don't allow other people's expectations to become your own. Other people's expectations, you know, as you become more enlightened, are just that. They're their expectations. Your expectations don't come from what other people lay on you. They come from how you process that. And one of the ways you have to process somebody else's negativity is to just say, but that's not mine. I don't own that. That's not for me. You start to spot that. You start seeing it everywhere, wherever you go. You start seeing other people doing this sort of thing and laying negative expectations on, and laying it on yourself as well. I mean, I can't tell you how many times people come up to me and say, oh, you've written a new book. Isn't it going to be really hard to go out and promote it? Or how do you ever go up in front of an audience of people and talk and do that again and after you've done it already 100 times? How could you possibly do that? And it's like, that's all their stuff. What they're really saying to me is, if that were me, I wouldn't be able to approach this from a fresh point of view each time. How do you do that? That's really what they're asking. And I always respond with that. I've never spoke to this audience before. And promoting this book's going to be wonderful. Well, what if you don't get this show or that show? Then I won't be on that show if they don't want me. That doesn't have anything to do with me or with what I'm doing. You know, and great things have no fear of time. You don't get yourself consumed with that. After a while, you learn that you process the things that people say to you from where it's coming from. And you don't own it. You don't become attached to it. It isn't yours. It's never yours. If anything, it just gives you an opportunity to be something even greater than anybody else ever thought that you could become. You see it coming, almost. And you see people subjected to it all the time. I mean, my children very often will come home with, you know, she said this about me, and he said that, and they said I can't do that. And I just always remind them that that's just their opinion. That's all it is. It's just an opinion. What you have is the power to do anything that you want to. Anything. And set your expectations for yourself. And know that you will become what you think about, what you expect to become. You'll become that. You see, if you have in your mind the idea that something is going to be very difficult, and then you have the choice between doing difficult things or easy things, you're always going to opt for the easy things. It's just sort of the way human beings work. So if, for example, you want to lose weight, and you've got yourself convinced how difficult this is going to be, and how painful it's going to be, and what a struggle it's going to be, and I just don't think I can do it, and I don't know how anybody, you know, could ever have to suffer the way I'm going to have to suffer, and you'll be on your weight loss program about an hour and a half. And then along will come a chocolate bar, and you'll say to yourself, now, which is it easier to do? Is it easier to just eat that chocolate bar, or to stay on this stupid diet anyway that I'm just going to go off of in another few hours anyway? And so you'll opt for the easy things. Right? So it's like what you want to learn to do is to make what it is that you want to accomplish really quite easy, really quite simple. And it really is quite simple to change virtually anything in your life. I mean, even the worst heroin addict in the world, who has finally gotten off of it, ultimately had to do it with his own mind. No matter how much help he had, or how many programs, or how much hypnotism, or whatever it may be, they ultimately still had to opt not to do that any longer. Even if the choice was taken away from them, they had to process it and get off of it themselves. And so whatever it is that you're trying to change, you ultimately still have only yourself to account to. And if you set yourself up to believe that something's going to be very complex and very difficult, I'm working on writing a new book now. If I were to tell myself right now, and I know what's involved in writing a book because I've written a dozen of them, and I know how much time and effort and all, if I were to start out writing a book with that and saying, oh, here's the first page, and I've got to fill 500 more of these, and then I've got to have it edited, and then I've got to go through it, and then I've got to go back through it again, and then I've got to go through the galleys, and it really is a major, major undertaking. You don't do that. I just say to myself, I can write this, and this is going to be fantastic, and I enjoy doing it, and I'll do it one step at a time, one moment at a time, one day at a time. You don't write a whole book in a year. You write it a day at a time. So this is Thursday, and I'll do what you do on Thursday, and so on. And you make it, in your mind, really something that's quite simple. Make things easy. Simplify, simplify. Don't make it some complex thing that involves a therapist and involves having to have all kinds of people change your behavior for you. You can change anything about yourself if you make up your mind that's what you want to do. And if you believe that it's going to be difficult, it will be. You know, whether you believe it's difficult or easy, either way you'll be right.
Another one of those secrets of the universe is that highly functioning people look for solutions, never for problems, always for solutions. I don't want to hear problems. How terrible it is. Isn't this awful? I want to hear, okay, these are the conditions. Let's see what can be done to make it work better. Solution-oriented people.
But you gotta change your awareness of yourself, as Maslow said. And one of the ways that you change your awareness of yourself is to understand a very simple premise. Think of an apple pie. Here's an apple pie, and this apple pie, you take this apple pie and you take a slice of this apple pie and you put it over here. And then you walk over to the slice and you say to the apple pie, the slice of apple pie, what are you like? What are you like? And the little slice of apple pie says, I must be like what I came from. You wouldn't expect it to be pineapple. You wouldn't expect it to be cherry. You would expect it to be like what it came from, right? So why is it that we understand this, and yet we don't understand that we too must be like what we came from? We must be, we are pieces of God. We came from a divine source. We have to trust in our divinity. We have to understand that we are not this package of bones and skin encapsulating, these internal organs, that's not who we are. That's what we call the false self. It's an illusion. That who we really are is what we came from. And what we came from is eternal, it's infinite, it's kind, it's unlimited, it excludes no one. So that if we understand that we are really here as spiritual beings, just having a human experience, not the other way around. We're not human beings having a spiritual experience, it's the other way around. Our essence is our greatness, what we came from. We must be like what we came from. I've just taken up this new practice. It's called yoga. Now, I'm 65 years old, and I've decided that there are certain things that I was told that I couldn't do at earlier stages of my life that I've decided I'm taking on. I don't care what my age is or what anybody else has told. What Mrs. McConnell told me in the 6th grade at Marquette Elementary School in Detroit, that you don't have to come to art class. It's really not for you. You can go dribble basketballs maybe, but you don't want to come to art. This is because she saw some of my stick drawings that I was pretty proud of. And then there was Mr. Tubbs at Denby High School in Detroit, who, when I turned in my first drawing in drafting class, I didn't even know what drafting was. I just signed. They threw me in there because the school was so overcrowded. It was my elective, and I turned in my first drawing, and he asked me the question, do you have a little sister? Like in the 3rd grade, because she perhaps is the one that did this way. That was my whole view of my artistic ability. I'm out there painting now. I'm doing painting. And I'm also doing yoga, all right? And I've learned some things about myself in the process of doing this. It was like a change in attitude, a shift, a belief system that I no longer was hanging on to. And that's what we have to do. It doesn't matter what your age is. It doesn't matter what your beliefs have been. It doesn't matter what other people have tried to convince you of in the past. When you move into spirit and have a knowing that I have the capacity to be able to do this, you leave behind the false self. And the false self is really nothing more than this ego. Look, you came from a divine place that is unlimited, that says you can be anything you put your attention on. And then you bought into a whole series of beliefs that were handed to you by very well-meaning people attempting to convince you that you had limitations, that you couldn't do this, that this wasn't possible. And I'd like to suggest to you that you took on something called an ego. E-G-O. An ego. You came in from divinity, you came in from a place of unlimited, you show up and you edged God out. E-G-O. And when you edge God out, it doesn't mean that you're sacrilegious. It doesn't mean that you're not a moral person. It means that you take on a belief system that says, who I am is no longer this infinite divine being who can step outside and observe this body and believe that he can make it do whatever I put my attention on and use it to have the same powers that is spoken about in the New Testament. Even the least among you can do all that I have done, and even greater things. It's within each and every one of us, except that we bought into an idea that who we are is what we have, who we are is what we do, who we are is what other people think I am, who I am is separate from everybody else, who I am is separate from what I would like to attract into my life, and who I am is separate from my source. And we believe in this separation, and we believe in this identity that who I am is what I have. So we start accumulating. We accumulate and accumulate and accumulate. The problem is that when you stop accumulating, and if who you are is what you accumulate, then you have no value as soon as your things start to disappear, as soon as they wear out, as soon as somebody else takes them, as soon as the government taxes them, as soon as any number of things. Who I am is what I do. If you no longer can do, then you aren't. You no longer exist. Who I am is my reputation, and we raise our children often to believe that what's most important is what other people think of you. Fit in. Do what you've been told to do. Do what the crowd does. Follow the herd. And you know what happens, what you step in when you follow the herd. So we take on all of these sort of false ideas, and we have a tendency to believe them. And inspiration is moving back into spirit, and it's moving back into spirit in such a way that you no longer accept yourself as anything other than divine.
So let's first examine this question of who you are. Who am I? Consider how many bodies you've occupied since birth. Who is the I that continues to leave one body behind and then enter another? You know for certain that you, the person that you call I, the one attempting to figure out who you are, started out in a little baby body weighing somewhere between 5 and 10 pounds. The I that is you fully entered and occupied that little baby body. Gradually you began to discard that baby body and move into a small toddler body that crawled, and then it walked, and then it ran, and took on an entirely new appearance. Your 2-year-old self would find it difficult to recognize the baby body that you'd now completely abandoned. You lived in this toddler body for a while and then discarded it, too, including every cell that was in your body at birth. The subsequent body you entered was a prepubescent body that bore a similarity to your toddler body, but was completely different. The I in the question still hasn't been discovered, but it's become absolutely clear that you are obviously not your body. Why? Because the I has remained, though it continuously sheds the body that it occupies. This strange phenomenon of you being an I that continuously enters, discards, and re-enters a new body has proceeded right up until this very moment. I am currently in a 71-year-old body that's nothing like the body I occupied 50 years ago. I remember well what that 20-year-old body I occupied looked like, and what it could do, and what it knew, and what it didn't know, but I can't find it anywhere. It's simply an illusion. It's gone from this physical world, as is every body that both you and I have occupied in our entire lifetime. The I that I use to describe myself is not so obsessed that he insists upon staying only in one body. In fact, the I that is me finally recognizes the ancient spiritual truth spoken by divine masters since antiquity. None of us are really doing anything. Rather, we, that is our bodies, are merely being done. What is your body being done by? An invisible, organizing intelligence that takes the cells of your body, changes them into new cells, and discards the old cells. The I that you think you are observes the entire process, for the most part helplessly. The physical body that you think of as you is rearranged in a pattern designed by a formless intelligence independent of your opinion. This I that you use to describe yourself isn't the physical form that you occupy and take with you everywhere. Quantum physics states that the body you're occupying, which is listening to these words right now, is completely different from the body you were in when you listened to the previous paragraph. Such is the nature of the physical world in which we all live. The ancient philosopher Heraclitus put it this way several thousand years ago, and it's true today. Quote, "All things are in motion and nothing is at rest. You cannot go into the same river twice." Unquote. A river is a constantly changing phenomenon, as is a tree, a mountain, a goat, a human, and the entire physical universe, including Earth. That which defines a thing, therefore, is not physical in nature, it's metaphysical. When asked what is real, an ancient spiritual avatar responded without hesitation, "That is real, which never changes." And since your body is in a continuous state of change, it really isn't real, according to this definition. If you try to find that toddler body you once occupied, you realize that it's not real, since it no longer exists.
Even while you were in it years ago, you couldn't call it real, because the moment you pinpointed and defined it as real, it would be something else, something new. What you're calling real would already have disappeared. Still, you know with all of this change taking place that there is a changeless component to who you are. The I in that toddler body hasn't changed. It's in the body that you currently occupy. The I is your higher self, changeless and real. This higher self is who you are. When you make this discovery and consciously befriend the I that you are, nothing is impossible. Keep in mind that if it is changing, it's not real. The I in the question, who am I, isn't anything that involves the physical you, since that continuously changes and disappears. Therefore, to answer the question, who am I, with any reference to your body and its various talents, accomplishments, accumulations, or physical prowess, is to define yourself as unreal. Who you are, then, must be changeless, and therefore birthless, as well as deathless. Who you are is a formless energy, a spirit, if you will, with the capacity to be unchanged and at the same time occupy an infinity of bodies. Think about this. It is truly a bewildering phenomenon. You are changeless and therefore real. What you've believed were facts explaining who you are simply illusions, or what metaphysicians call unreal. You're not an American, an Italian, or an African. You're not a male or a female, a Democrat or a Republican. You're one with the true oneness, God. You are not athletic or magical, mathematical or literary, or any other label. Transcending labels, particularly those that have been placed on you by others in your past, opens you to the opportunity of soaring in the now in any way that you desire. You can be all things at any present moment in your life. When this divine intelligence is limitless and without boundaries and is who we are, is just one of those absurd notions that tells us that it is our lower identities that who we are, rather than that which is noticing and watching it and living in it and is ageless and timeless and formless. Your family relationships are in your mind. When you close your eyes, your family disappears. Where do they go? Nowhere, but doing this exercise helps you to recognize that your relatives exist as thoughts in your mind. If the focus of your inner dialogue about your family members is on what they're doing that's wrong, then that's precisely how your relationship with them will be experienced. If your inner speech centers on what's annoying about them, then that's what you'll notice. As much as you're inclined to blame them for your annoyance, it's yours, and it's coming from your thoughts. If you make a decision to put your inner attention, your life energy, on something quite different, your relationship will change. In your thoughts, where your family relationships exist, you'll no longer be annoyed, angry, hurt, or depressed. If in your mind you're thinking, my intention is to be authentic and peaceful with this relative, then that's what you'll experience, even if that relative continues to be exactly the way he or she has always been. Changing your mind is really changing your relationships. Being authentic and peaceful with your relatives is only a thought away. You can learn to change your thoughts by intending to create authentic and peaceful feelings within yourself. No one is capable of making you upset without your consent, and you've given your consent too frequently in the past. When you begin practicing the intention to be authentic and peaceful, you withdraw your consent to be in the lower energy. You connect to peace itself and decide to bring peace to your relatives, thereby immediately gaining the power to change the energy of family gatherings. Prior to my waking up to the power of intention, family visits were events that caused me consternation because of the attitudes and behavior of some of my wife's relatives. I'd prepare for a Sunday afternoon family visit by getting anxious and upset over what I anticipated to be a fretful, lousy experience, and I seldom disappointed myself. I'd focus my thoughts on what I didn't like, and I defined my relationship with my in-laws in this manner. Gradually, as I began to understand the power of intention and left my ego behind, I substituted kindness, receptivity, love, and even beauty for my former annoyed and angry assessments. Before family get-togethers, I'd remind myself that I'm what I choose to be in any and all circumstances, and I chose to be authentically peaceful and have a good time. In response to something that used to annoy me, I'd now say to my mother-in-law in a loving way, "I never thought of it that way. Tell me more." In response to what I previously considered to be an ignorant comment, I'd respond, "That's an interesting point of view. When did you first learn about this?" In other words, I was bringing my own intention to be in a state of peace to this encounter, and was refusing to judge them. The most amazing things began to happen. I started looking forward to having these family members at our home. I began to see them as much more enlightened than I'd previously thought. I actually enjoyed our times together, and every time something came up that I'd found annoying in the past, I'd overlook it and respond with love and kindness instead. At an earlier stage of my life, expressions of racial or religious prejudice were a stimulus for my anger and resentment. Now I'd quietly respond with a kind and gentle reminder of my own opinions and simply let the matter drop. Over the years, I found that not only did the racial and religious slurs diminish to zero, but I noticed that my in-laws were expressing tolerance and even love toward minorities, as well as those who practiced religions different from their own. Although my primary intention was to stay in a state of peace, I discovered that by not joining in the low energies of my in-laws, not only was the entire family more peaceful, but many enjoyable and even enlightening conversations developed. I had as much to learn from my in-laws as I had to teach. Even when I disagreed vehemently with a judgment directed at me, if I remembered my intention to have a peaceful relationship with them, I was able to do just that. No longer did I think about what I disliked, or what was missing, or what always had been. I stayed focused on making these gatherings fun, loving, and most important to me, peaceful.
And what you have to learn to do is develop an inner candle flame that never flickers, though the worst goes before you. You must know that all of the problems, all the difficulties, all the victimization that you may feel in your life, all of the strings that are being pulled by somebody else, are really things that you have allowed up until now. And now you make a recommitment to your own excellence, or your own non-victim status, if you will. Some of the categories of where people dichotomize and judge are good and bad. They try to put the whole world into what is good and what is bad based upon some perception I have. And those things that don't fit into it the way I think they ought to be are bad, and all the things that I agree with are good. And so you find yourself going through your whole life running into half of the people or more who are doing things in a different way than you do and judging them all to be bad, and therefore being their victim because they now own your emotional strings. Remember, being a victim isn't necessarily a physical thing. In fact, that's very seldom the thing, because we have laws to protect each other from being physically abused by each other. It isn't as if somebody's putting you into a jail, into a cell. It is the victimization is what you experience in your mind and in your emotions. And this comes from judging, from categorizing, from compartmentalizing people and putting them into the compartments. And then when they don't fit with the behavior that you think they should exhibit, you find yourself upset and worked up and angry and hurt. It's really important to develop a quiet mind when it comes to all of this. A quiet mind is a mind that is at peace, a mind that doesn't judge. Just because you label somebody else to be something obnoxious or nasty or hurtful doesn't mean that that's what they are. That's just your judgment, and that's your definition of yourself as someone who needs to judge. So learning not to judge and unclogging your mind, if you will, of judgments and negativity, and quieting your mind.
Whenever I speak, I always repeat an affirmation from A Course in Miracles. And this affirmation goes like this. It says, if you knew, it doesn't say if you believed, it says if you knew, a knowing means an absence of doubt, if you knew who walked beside you at all times on this path that you have chosen, you could never experience fear or doubt again. And I remind myself of that as I take the microphone. And if I'm going to speak for a weekend or 20 minutes or anything in between, I always remind myself that I'm not alone, that I am connected to something that I am a part of. And it doesn't matter what you call it. As Alan Watts said, you can't get wet from the word water. Whether you call it water or aqua or anything in between, Bazer, it's not what you call it that will make you wet. It's the substance of it. So whether you call this God or soul or spirit or consciousness is of no consequence. And it's shifting into that knowing. I've often said that when Jesus would approach a leper, he wouldn't go up to the leper and say, You know, we haven't been having a whole lot of success here with leprosy lately. It's really running rampant here. There are noses falling off, there are fingers in the ditch. This is not a pleasant sight. But I've got some advice, and I've got some herbs. And if you listen to my advice and you take these herbs, you have a 30% chance of surviving over the next 5 years. He would never say that. He said, walk. You are healed. Rise. And healing would take place. And even the least among you can do all that I have done, and even greater things. And it's a very intriguing kind of idea, this notion of being in a state of mind in which you can have a knowing that is so profound that doubt can never enter into it. Now you have this knowing. I remember when I first read the works of the Buddha, he said the first and most significant thing for any of us to know is to come to know something that cannot be destroyed by death. The most important thing that you can learn in your life, said the Buddha, is to come to know something that cannot be destroyed by death. Jung put it this way. He said the telling question of your life is your relationship to the infinite. If you have one, you are on a path of higher awareness. If you don't, you're not. Do you have a sense of the infinite? When Lao Tzu was asked the question, what is real, Master? What is real? By his devotees and students. And Lao Tzu in the 6th century before Christ in China was considered to be God in a human form. He had that same ability, the gift of fish and loaves. He was the founder and the author of the Tao and Taoism, but he would perform miracles wherever he would go. Lights would come from him. He was considered to be one of those light beings 600 years before the birth of Christ. And when they said, what is real, Master? What is real? He said, that is real which never changes. Now you look at yourself and you try to find and define something about yourself that meets that criteria, that meets that definition. What about you has never changed? Is it your body? Certainly not mine. I hold a hair up on the pillow in the morning. Say to my wife, honey, this is the metaphysical question. Final answer. What held it in yesterday? We have no idea. I've had this experience several million times. Right? So the part of us that has never changed isn't even what we're aware of. It isn't even our mind. Our mind is changing all the time. The part of us that has never changed is called awareness. Awareness. Not what you're aware of, but awareness. And awareness is the unchangeable. It's the part of us that when we begin to live from there, we begin to make dramatic shifts in our consciousness and in our lives. When people ask me what my view of God is, I always say I always see God as the ocean, and I see myself as a glass. And if I take this glass and I dip it into the ocean, I say, what do I have here? What I have here is a glass of God. It's not as big, and it's not as strong, but it's still God. And just like a wave on the ocean is what the ocean is doing, we are all what God is doing.
I read an interesting article this summer on the astronauts and their spiritual experiences of having gone into the universe outside of the Earth plane and looking back. And one of the astronauts was quoted as saying,
that when he looked back at the Earth, this blue, blue planet, like what our sky is what you see from out there, and you look then in one direction, you see Earth and this tiny, tiny little dot, this blue dot, and then you look out the other way and you see an infinite number of worlds, and you look all around you and you're surrounded by this infinity of this universe. He said, I realized that there's an intelligence to this system, that it is an intelligent system that is all absolutely, and he's like, it happened for him in a moment, this instantaneous kind of realization that there's an intelligence to all of this, that the intelligence that is a part of the universe, or that is allows the universe to work. Again, the label isn't important. He said it made him realize that it's all working absolutely perfectly, and that it's all on purpose, and that all of it has a purpose. Well, I have discovered that most people really don't believe they have a purpose, or they spend a big hunk of their life trying to discover their purpose, or they will find so many events transpiring in their life that seem to be inconsistent with any kind of grander purpose, that it's impossible for them to accept that this is anything but just one grand accident. I know it's not an accident. And once you discover your purpose, and the way that you discover that, that's that secret source. So that's the secret force, if you will, that is within you at all times. This invisible, silent, empty space that is a part of every one of us. That is what allows us to be. My own development is probably just as appropriate to talk about here as anything on these tapes, because I often think to myself that if I can do it, coming from where I came from, that anybody can. I come from impoverished beginnings, a child who never had an allowance in his life, didn't even know what it was. When other kids would talk about my allowance, I didn't know anything about that, because there just wasn't anybody there to give me an allowance. The people that were there didn't have it to give away anyway. So it was very, very early in my own development that I learned the secrets of being my own person and my own strengths. That internal kind of knowingness isn't something I believe that I learned somewhere along the line through some magical, instantaneous kind of revelation. It was something that I believe I showed up with here. And that I think that every single person has that capacity for, but they don't seem to choose it. And it's like knowing that you have that inner strength, and knowing that nobody else can make you unhappy, and knowing that no circumstance out there is too big for you to handle, and knowing that when you go off to sleep at night, no matter what has happened all day long, that you still only have yourself to live with, and that very private inner world wherein you talk to yourself, and we call this self-talk or whatever you want to call it. All of us do this all the time. We have these conversations with ourselves, which is really two people. We are having a conversation with ourselves, and we do this all the time. And what the quality of those conversations are, how you process the daily events of your life and all of the things that are happening to you, is really the secret source of enormous strength. And then, as you get a little older, you begin to put a label on that. You begin to identify that in some way as something that is more than just an intuitive way of processing the world in a positive direction. It's more than that. You begin to realize that you're not alone. And a lot of people believe that they are alone in the world, and that this inner world of thought, this inner world of power and of inner conviction, or whatever you want to call it, is something that you can rely on, but it's not just something that you're alone with. And as I got older and more experienced in it, I began to see that I believe I have someone with me, or guides with me, or some kind of help available to me at all times. And it's just really a question of whether you decide to believe it or don't believe it. It isn't anything we can put to a double-blind study and have scientists come up and say, no, this doesn't exist or that doesn't exist. It's just a knowing. And when you have that guide, and almost all of the great spiritual masters and the great religions and so on, when you begin to study them, as I have done in more recent years in my life and written books about them and produced tapes about them, you begin to discover that the greatest thinkers, the great contributors, all have this sort of inner knowing that they're not alone, that help is available to you. Help in the form of whatever you want to call it isn't even relevant. If you want to call it God, or you want to call it Buddha, or you want to call it Christ, or you want to call it spirituality or consciousness or whatever, it isn't the label that's important. It's the experience of it. And it's the knowing that it's there, and knowing that you can go there at any time.